Imagine you're trapped in Nazi Europe in World War II. You might be a captured soldier or a bomber pilot who's been shot down or a refugee. Your survival now depends on your ability to escape. But how do you evade capture in unknown terrain?
Somebody yelled out Germans, and we were absolutely frozen stiff. 50% fear and 50% cold.
Tens of thousands of men and women staked their lives following routes that became known as the Freedom Trails.
That's freedom up there. You're not quite home yet. These routes through enemy territory led to safety, but many were extremely perilous.
Si è rischiato tantissimo. Dal primo fino all'ultimo non ne lasciavano uno.
To find them required the help of local resistance fighters who risked their own lives to save others.
Un italiano con che salvava gli inglesi veniva fucilato sul Stato.
I want to retrace these routes that have since become legendary.
Now we're in the mountains proper.
Discover what it took to escape.
Pretty claustrophobic space.
And meet the ordinary men and women who became heroes in the process.
You helped me to safety. You're a wonderful, wonderful person.
This time I'm in the Abruzzo region of central Italy.
I'm here to tell a remarkable story of evasion and escape.
This is the Polinia Valley, surrounded on all sides by steep mountain slopes. During the Second World War, it held a Nazi prison camp containing thousands of Allied prisoners of war. One of them was Len Harley. Len was a 22-year-old lad from Hackney who ended up as a sergeant with the British Army Rifles.
I told my mother I wanted to join the army, so I joined up. We were given a quick medical and a £5 note, and that was it. I was in the army.
In a way, Len's situation reflects the situation of so many men and women caught up in this conflict. He was an ordinary man caught up in an extraordinary situation.
He was captured when fighting the Nazis in Libya in 1941.
And there it is, Camp 78. And Len was brought here after a hellish journey. He was emaciated, he was a broken man by the time he arrived. And it's really incongruous, actually, because it's an incredibly beautiful spot.
But behind that gate, for the men who were here for several years, it was a very different experience.
And that was a horrible thing. You can't describe how you feel, you know. So at the bottom of your life's, you know, fallen away.
Look at that incredible rock face that just towers over the camp.
Camp 78 held up to 3,000 British and Commonwealth servicemen in a series of huts. But this was a prison within a prison.
You can see the fence there, you can see the watchtower. That was a man-made barrier to stop them getting out. And if you add to that the enemy would have had positions on the high ground there, just watching them at all times. To all intents and purposes, they were in a citadel and they were completely trapped.
Conditions at the camp were poor, and Len and his fellow POWs struggled to survive on the rations they were given.
There were probably about 50 in each hut, and we had one meal a day, which was a little bowl of soup. It was watered rice, really, you know. So that's all we had.
So this was the living space for 50 men, for years. Although during their time in this camp, they weren't under direct threat, There was a different type of pressure on them, and that was the slow mental deterioration of daily routine, of boredom, of just doing the same thing day in, day out. All these men had was time, and it broke them.
It was a pretty monotonous life, you know. Sometimes you get a bit downhearted and you crawl up into the corner of the camp and go on, trying to get over your misery.
Then, in September 1943, came astonishing news. The Allies had landed in the south. As they began to advance north, the fall of fascism had finally begun. Prison camps across Italy were in a state of chaos. In Camp 78, the guards simply fled. This left those inside with a difficult choice to make.
The senior officer said, well, lads, you're on your own now, and it's all everybody for himself.
After more than 2 years incarcerated in the camp, Len and a few mates decided to take their chances and go on the run.
Let's just consider that decision for a moment. Everything Len knew was here. This was his whole world for the last couple of years. His friends, his security, his safety, his routine, it was all within this camp. And yet he'd made the decision to go. And the implications of that are massive. The moment he crossed this line, he became a prisoner of war on the run. There was a price on his head. This area was swarming with German troops. There were Italian militias. This was a divided and very, very dangerous part of the world. And yet, he still made the decision. You'd think those first moments of freedom would be euphoric, but in fact, they must have been absolutely terrifying.
Len and the others ran to the foot of the mountains behind the camp. Many of his fellow prisoners remained, but the fate of those who stayed was often bleak. Across Italy, more than 50,000 were taken to Nazi camps in Germany and Poland in cattle trains. From the foot of the mountains, Len and his small group of escapees moved slowly along the ridge away from the camp, keeping a very low profile.
We stayed up there, not quite knowing what to do with ourselves. But it got to a point where we were feeling very, very hungry.
Up ahead is a wall, and that's the first sign of human habitation, really, since setting out. And for Len, this was very significant indeed. He knew he was in areas that people worked. There would have been goat herders up here, and what had become very obvious is that Len needed help.
He came across a young shepherd boy from a local town. He explained that they were in trouble and the boy ran for help. Hours later, a man came up the hill. His name was Fiore Fabili.
He introduced himself. He said, I speak American.
Fiore offered them a lifeline. He would take them to his home where they would be safe. But little did they know that this was just the start of an epic game of cat and mouse. Pacentro is known as one of the most beautiful towns in the whole of Italy. But under the surface, it was not what it seemed.
Len had entered what appeared to be quite a safe environment. But actually, it's an environment of huge complexity and of huge danger if you're a prisoner of war on the run. You've got this set of alleyways. It's a warren. It's impossible to move around here without people noticing your presence. Everywhere here, there are eyes on you.
Fiore took them to a cellar where he could look after them out of sight of the German forces that were stationed in the town.
As well as having Germans everywhere, around every corner, you also had your neighbors as well, that you had to make sure that they were on the right side, as it were. You had fascists on the ground, Italian forces, who'd sided with fascism and were more ferocious than the German occupiers.
Len and the others were relieved to be in a safe place, but soon the return to prison-like conditions started to have an effect.
It was very cramped. It was just a room with a grill, small grill in the ceiling. And in actual fact, after a day or so, we were beginning to think we were better off in the prison camp. But he brought us food down.
So many of Italy's ordinary population, those suffering extreme poverty, helped the escaping Allied prisoners of war to hide and evade. But Fiore wasn't the only local prepared to risk their life to help. Silvio Alboni, who also lived in Precentro during the war, was just 13 years old when he found 3 prisoners of war outside a neighbour's barn. As a child, Silvio lived a challenging life. He was an orphan. He didn't go to school, seldom wore shoes and had little food, but he wanted to help.
Dove ci sta portando adesso?
Sotto, no.
Silvio remembers well one escapee called Jim, and he's going to show me the place where he hid him and the other men.
And here, Silvio, was where they were hiding. So the Germans, they were close all the time.
Passavano per la strada, pure venivano qua.
So Silvio, this is where you found them. Tell me about Jimmy.
Io ho voluto bene assai, perché non avevo nessuno.
But then came terrible news. The Germans planned to create a large garrison in the town. It would be too dangerous for Jim and the others to stay. Silvio led them to the foot of the mountains behind Precentro and had to say goodbye.
And when they said goodbye, what was that moment like?
Quando vi siete salutati, com'è stato quel momento?
Ah, mi sta stretta, mi ha baciato e è partita la lacrima. Oggi.
He got down, hugged me, and they started crying.
And Silvio, I don't know if they ever said thank you, so I want to say thank you. Thank you so much for what you did.
Silvio didn't hear from Jim again and had no idea if he made it to safety. But he went on to have a happy life and a large family. And he's invited me to meet them. It's fantastic seeing Silvio surrounded by his extended family, and that the hospitality of the locals here still thrives today.
Bravo, bravo, bellissimo.
With Silvio's help, Jim had escaped. But Len and his group were still holed up in their cellar when the Nazi garrison arrived. The Nazis began to set up lookouts. They blocked roads and made it known that if anyone was caught harboring prisoners, their entire families would be shot. One morning, Fiore came running into the cellar and said the SS were searching every building.
We have to get you out of here. And suddenly, they were caught like rats in a trap.
I'm in Italy following the escape route of British soldier Len Harley. Len and his group had been forced to flee the town of Precentro when the SS arrived, and they were escorted into the hills by Fiore, the man who'd taken them in.
The Germans were now on their tail in hot pursuit, and Fiore knew he had to get them out of Precentro as quickly as possible. So Len and the group were moved to the edge of the village, and they got to a ravine. And in that ravine, they found a cave.
The cave was black inside, absolutely black. But what we didn't realise was, once we got the lights up, the cave walls were covered with spiders, thousands of them.
The cave was also crawling with lice, but they had no choice but to hide out there for a week.
So we used to come out during the daytime and sit on this outcrop of rock. We were running alive with lice, absolutely running alive. We used to take all their clothes off and sit on the outcrop of rock, killing the lice. I mean, it just looked like monkeys, you know.
They couldn't stay there much longer. Fiore knew there were informants in the village, and the cave was right on the edge of the village. And also, they knew that there was only one way in and one way out. They literally had their backs against the wall, and if they were discovered, there was nowhere left to run. And they made the decision that they had to go. Fiore had to return to Picentro, leaving the men to fend for themselves. But the unique geography of this landscape, with mountains on all sides, forced them to remain in the valley. All they could do was keep searching for somewhere to hide. Len and the others walked around the edge of Sulmona, but they were still extremely vulnerable. They could have been discovered at any time. And they were becoming desperate. They needed somewhere to lie up. And then they saw that place there. It was now winter, and this barn offered them welcome shelter until they could plan their next move. They were hungry and tired and massively relieved to be out of the cave. Even now it feels like a real haven. These great solid walls, feels like the keep of a castle. But after they spent a little while here, remember this was November, so there was thick snow outside and it was really cold, they realized that they weren't going to survive without help. And they made the decision to contact that farmhouse. This first attempt at contact did not go well. Senor Panfilo Spinosa, the father of the house, turned them away initially. He knew how dangerous it was to harbor POWs, but fortunately the conversation had been overheard by the daughter, Rosina.
And the door opened at this farmhouse, and a girl came out with something on her head. And she walked up the hillside and came up to us, and she got a basket of food. And she apologised for her father and said, very, very sorry, but he's frightened of the Germans. So she left us this basket of food. It was absolutely fantastic.
19-year-old Rosina was determined to help them.
Portava a mangiare, perché se mangiavano, non tenevano niente.
Len and his mates spent a staggering 5 months at the Spinosa's farmstead during the harsh winter. Conditions were too severe in the mountains to attempt to climb them.
One night, as we walked up to the barn, she came out of the house and she gave us each a hot brick wrapped in rag. So we took it into the barn. So, kind of gave us some amount of warmth.
I've been invited to see the house where the Spinosas lived during the war by Rosina's cousin, Bruno.
Hello, how are
Nice to
you?
see you
Good to
again.
see you again.
May I introduce you to Bruno?
Hello, Bruno. Buongiorno. Come sta? Good to meet you. And thank you for showing me your house.
It's an honor for me.
Very kind. Thank you.
And then for quite a while, I used to go up every night and collect food from her. I'd be on the front of the wood, and I used to wait there for her to put a light in the window.
Then one day, out of the blue, the safety they'd come to know was shattered.
Era la sera era Santa Biagiola, la festa. Allora mamma ha detto, quella ha detto, facemi venire poverina. Dice, almeno si mangiano qualche cosa.
About 17 people were here at the time.
Wow, bedlam. Must have been bedlam.
Suddenly there was a knock at the door, and the farmer got up, went to the door and opened it, and he yelled out Tedeschi, Germans. Well, of course, there was panic stations.
Si diceva così che ti uccidevano se ti trovavano i prigionieri.
Rosina needed to act fast.
L'ho presa al braccio e fatti scappa che hanno venuto i tedeschi. E allora l'hanno fatto nascondere sopra.
The family dragged a wardrobe across the doorway to the attic to conceal it while the Germans were ransacking the house. An informant had betrayed the Spinosas, revealing they were harbouring Allied prisoners of war. While this was going on, Len and fellow POW Nick were cowering in the attic.
If you can imagine the scene, two men, terrified, crouched in the pitch darkness, just listening to the commotion, hearing it getting closer and closer, feet on the stairs, shouts as that room there was searched, knowing that if that door opened, it was all over.
The Germans failed to find Len and Nick. And as punishment, they arrested two of the Spinosa family members in their place.
This is Emilio Spinosa, Bruno's older brother, who was also arrested with his father. And this is his wife.
So this was that elder brother who was taken away. There he is, right there. And the extraordinary thing about this is he didn't have to go. He volunteered because his older brother was going to be taken. And his older brother had a wife and children. And at the time, this guy didn't. So he said, take me, don't take him, take me. Which is an amazing gesture. Salute. Grazie mille. Chin chin. Chin chin. Thank you for telling me your amazing story. Salute.
Len got incredibly lucky with the Spinosas, and even in this moment of maximum peril to their family, all they thought about was hiding him. And they did so out of a sense of decency and a sense of honour. And that was a scene that was reflected all over Italy. And the families that did so sometimes paid a terrible price. One of the most heartbreaking stories I've heard happened at the prison nearby. Michele Del Greco, a local shepherd, helped 56 Allied POWs until the German authorities discovered what he was up to. He was tried and sentenced to death.
This is where Michele Del Greco was held. And it's strange because it's such a beautiful space. The architecture is exquisite. You can see it's a perfect place for a prison. You've got the small rooms here. These are the cells. You've got these big kind of medieval doors and this big old courtyard. It was originally built as a monastery. And this is the site where the execution was carried out, just around the corner there. And here's the plaque. Michele Del Greco, executed by the Nazis by firing squad, 22nd of December 1943, for helping escaped prisoners, English, French, Russian, and American. And when he spoke to the priest just before he was executed, he said, all I did was put into practice what I was taught as a child in church, that if someone's hungry, you feed them. This was a fundamentally decent man. Michele was actually made a martyr by the Vatican because of the sacrifices he made. And just up above there, that little montage of flowers there, that was put there by his daughter, Raffaella.
Finalmente si è aperta la porta di questo carcere, si è aperta la porta di questa stalla. Escono i tedeschi prima. Risento ancora quel rumore di scarponi per quel, diciamo, il ballatoio. Prima di prendere le scale ci passavano davanti. Vedemmo una della folla che si avvicinò a uno di questi e disse: «Finì, c'est fini?» «Oui, oui». E condamné a morte. Quando ci vide papà, ci abbracciò, ci disse: «Che cosa fate? Vi mettete a piangere?» «Non c'è niente da piangere». È andata così, non c'è niente da piangere. e io sarà quello che sarà. Ma sprancò la porta di casa. Non volle vedere nessuno. Chiuse le finestre e lì noi piangemmo tutto il nostro dolore, tutta la nostra disperazione.
I think this is a very modern story because now we've got huge movements of people through Europe, and yet again the Italians are coming to the fore. But back in the war, if you took someone in, you put yourself at risk and you put your whole family at risk. Would I do it? Would you do it? Len had been forced to flee the Spinosa's home. Now, after 6 months in total on the run, he was desperate to get out of the valley and find Allied safety on the other side of the mountains. To do that, he needed a guide, someone to show him a route through the mountain passes. And luckily, such a person existed. They were put onto a guide called Alberto, who had unparalleled knowledge of the mountains. This was good because he could get them over there, but it was bad because, as far as the Germans were concerned, he was a marked man. Alberto Pietro Razio was one of the most notable figures in the organisation of escapees across the mountain. He knew every rock and crevice. If anyone could help Len, it was him. Len and the others now had to flee Nazi-occupied Sulmona, with a man more wanted than they were. But the mountains were now finally in their sights. So Len had escaped the prison camp, he'd evaded capture, he'd found a guide in Alberto. It was time after 6 months on the run, to finally attempt Monte Amaro. And tomorrow morning, at dawn, so do I. I'm following the route of Len Harley. He'd been on the run for months in the area that was fast becoming the front line of the fight between the Germans and the Allies. He'd finally found a guide to trek over the treacherous Monte Amaro. I've found my own guides to take me along the route. Okay, that's Nico up ahead, and that's Marco with his pink boots and his green jacket, and we're heading up into the clouds because beyond there is the mountain. And the guys are going to guide me up and over the route that's pretty close to the route Len took all those years ago. Len and the others had a precarious path ahead of them, not only due to the steepness of the mountain, but also because they were attempting this climb in winter. They were due to spend their final night before setting out in a mountain hut with the promise of a lamb stew.
I hadn't seen meat for about 4 years. And we put it in this cauldron, and it was boiling away. And the smell was out of this world, it really was. Just as we were looking forward to eating it, along comes the guide and say, "Come on, lads, we're going out tonight."
Leaving a meal behind seems reckless, but unexpectedly, the conditions to leave were just right. The mountain of Monte Amaro is almost a third of the height of Everest. At 9,170 feet, it's a true giant. And in World War II, it was covered in German defences as the Allies progressed north. Rumours were strong that over the other side there was a town that was in Allied hands. But Len didn't know that. He didn't know it 100%. So in so many ways, this was a march into the unknown. As they progressed up the mountain, the weather could be unpredictable. But that could also work to their advantage. Of course, Nico and Marco, this was good for the prisoners.
Yes,
because
sure.
they couldn't be seen. And this was the only way
they could get over.
I'm a local guide.
Yeah, so same as me with you.
Like
The only way I'm getting over is with you.
you are a prisoner. So.
I am your prisoner, basically. Just broken out of the woods. This was a point of real danger from now on, because this whole area was patrolled by specialist mountain troops. Of course, this was in the winter when the escape took place, and the group could be seen for miles.
In this exposed landscape, they were constantly on tenterhooks, but they had no choice but to push on to the top.
Every now and then, the clouds part. You get this amazing view of where we're going, this great cauldron, this amphitheatre. And what a sight it must have been for Len. That's freedom up there. You're not quite home yet. This is quite a significant moment, really, because we're leaving the path and we're crossing onto the snow. Now we're in the mountains proper.
The German patrols in the Majella Mountains were highly trained in snow warfare. And at this time, in March 1944, with the Allied lines advancing, the Germans were trying to push back wherever they could.
Hey, Monty. Now
Okay.
we have stopped and
Yeah.
put crampons.
I've never worn crampons before, my first time.
First time.
This will be my first
here.
time.
It's a pleasure for us that you try for first time crampons here in Majella.
It's going to be life-changing.
Okay. And then I use it too. Okay.
Okay.
La.
Excellent. Ready for anything.
Good.
I'll do Majella, then I'll do K2.
Len was taking on tough terrain he'd never experienced before. But it was the unpredictable weather that hit him hard.
And by this time, a blizzard came up. Snow biting into your face. You couldn't see anything other than looking directly ahead.
This weather's closed in. Conditions change here. Like that. I'm walking in some big footsteps here. They didn't have crampons. And they didn't have this modern gear. And this would have been a real feat of endurance for them. Len and his mates would have been going for a saddle. They wouldn't have gone straight over the peak. But the problem with the saddles is that they tended to be guarded by the Germans. So just cresting the rise was a dangerous moment.
After an 18-hour hard slog, the summit was finally in sight.
Bellissimo, bravo. Right, let's go.
In the safe hands of Alberto, Len and his mate had made it to the plateau beyond the summit. There was just one way to celebrate.
Before we left the journey, one of the Italian women had given us a bottle of cognac. So Nick suddenly said, I'm going to have a drink of cognac. And he opened his bottle. We both had a swig of it. I'd never had cognac in my life.
But their celebration was short-lived. They now had to cross the plateau.
It's been a long old day. We're just getting towards dusk. And as the sun disappears behind the mountains, the temperature plummets, becomes dangerously cold. And there's a really strong wind as well. And happily, that's the refuge down there, where I'm going to be spending the night.
Len didn't have that luxury. He and the others had to keep going through the night across the plateau and straight down into the valley.
I'm feeling a lot more civilized, got a fire crackling away. I can hear the wind outside. We're in a valley here and it's whistling round the valley. So these refuges are here to keep you alive, basically, here. And we'll do the rest of the journey tomorrow morning. Nico, Marco, thank you. Thank you for getting me up the hill, introducing me to crampons.
Good job.
I hope this nightcap helps us get a good night's sleep
Saluting.
before we go down the mountain tomorrow. And that's not as easy as it might sound. I'm following the route of Len Harley and his mate Nick. After months on the run in German-occupied Italy, they found a guide to take them over Monte Amaro, the highest peak in the Majella Mountains. We're up at the crack of dawn to begin our descent into the valley.
It's quite a thought that we're doing this in 2 days, basically. And Len and the others did all of this in one go, up and down. They were marching into who knows what. They thought the Allies were down there, but they couldn't be 100% sure. They also knew this area was still being patrolled. They were still in danger. So as they got lower and lower, they were just marching into the unknown and they had to rely on luck.
We've got high-tech hiking gear and are starting to feel the strain of this slope. But Len and the others had another idea for tackling this steep descent.
He'd got on his backside and we were sliding down this mountain. And so I did the same. I mean, we could have hit a rock or something like that, you know.
Within hours, they'd reached the relative safety of the tree line.
So, Nico, how much further do you think?
It's not so far, Monty. Maybe half hour we arrive.
Half hour?
Yes.
I believe you.
Yes.
I'm going to hold you to that.
Yes, sure.
But this environment was still a dangerous one. We've stumbled across something that's a stark reminder of how unpredictable the mountain slopes can be, especially when making this descent in winter.
This is a big avalanche. Entire side of this mountain from the top.
Good.
2,000 meters.
Amazing. And was anyone killed? Or?
No, nobody.
This was this is a really good example of the sorts of things that Len faced and the others faced coming across the mountains. This is why they needed a guide. And Len, he was a Hackney lad. He didn't know anything about stuff like this, and he would have been killed. And many escaping prisoners were. They were killed by the mountains. So dealing with really elemental forces. Yeah.
They were in the final steps of their arduous journey, but there was one last moment of peril.
This is Journey's End. This is called the Throat. And about 50 meters beyond this is the town of Faro San Martino. And that's where they were heading. But the big problem they faced is although the danger of the mountains was behind them, they really had no idea who was going to be holding the town on the other side of this really narrow gully. This must have been an incredibly tense moment after a harrowing journey.
So we walked through the village, and there wasn't a sound, there wasn't a sign of life at all. Quiet as the grave. And I turned around to my mate and I said, whoever comes along now can have me. I've had enough. We walked along the road and suddenly came some partisans, Italians, covered with bandoliers, rifles, grenades hanging all over them. And we put our hands up and we thought, what side are they on? You know, are they German or are they English, you know? And from behind the rock came an Indian officer with a turban. And we knew we were safe.
We're done?
Yeah,
Are we done?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, chap. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
No.
And now, I'm going to buy you a beer. I'm going to buy you a beer. Right there. Yes, please. Thank you. Lovely. Gracias. Salute.
Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers. Well done, chaps. This must have been an outstanding moment for Len. He'd put himself through hell over the previous 24 hours, and indeed over the previous 6 months, and he'd made it, he'd got here. But there's another side to this story as well, and I think it's vividly illustrated by the guys behind me. In the Second World War, the prisoners had to risk their lives going over the mountains to get to freedom, but the mountain guides didn't. It was their choice. So really, the unsung hero of this story is actually Alberto, who put his life on the line willingly at the hands of the Germans in order to get these prisoners of war over the mountain range and take them to freedom. Len, once he'd reached Faro San Martino, was shipped to Naples, and then from Naples, shipped home to the UK. And that was the end of his war.
During the German raid at the Spinosa's home, 2 family members were taken as punishment. But thankfully, they survived their incarceration and returned home at the end of the war. Fiore, the man who hid Len in Pacentro, emigrated to America, where he died in 1993. A huge price was placed on mountain guide Alberto's head, but he survived the war and moved to Canada. Len returned home in April 1944, when he married his wife, Wynne. The birth of his 2 children quickly followed, but he thought of the Spinosas often. He visited Italy twice specifically to try and find them, but sadly the trips were unsuccessful.
But there is one more chapter to the story. I'm driving to the Spinosa's house at the moment, and waiting for me there is Rosina, who was the young girl who persuaded the head of the household to take the prisoners in, Bruno and the rest of the Spinosa family. And through the wonders of modern technology, I've arranged for Len to speak to the family. So for the first time in 75 years, Len is going to get a chance to say thank you. Buongiorno. Buongiorno.
Hello, Monty.
Hello, Consuela.
Nice to see
How are you?
again. Oh, may I introduce you? Rosina. Lui è
Rosina.
Monty.
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno.
Come sta?
Rosina.
It's a great pleasure to meet you. Thank you very much for sharing this moment with me.
At his home in England, Len and his daughter are getting ready for a moment he never thought would happen.
Rosanna,
È senza parole.
it's so wonderful to see you. Many, many years, 74 years ago since I saw you last. We went through a lot together, so I can't thank you enough for all the things you did for me. You helped me to safety. You're a wonderful, wonderful person. Absolutely wonderful. Are you well?
I'm fine, good.
Very good.
Sì, I happy to
She
see
says
you.
she's happy to see you and your daughter.
And it's all because of you, Rosina.
Without all of your help, there's a possibility I might not be here today. Dad wouldn't have gone back and got married, and he and my mum wouldn't have had me and my brother. So we have a lot to thank you for. So that comes from the bottom of my heart. Thank you very much.
Grazie. Thank you to you too.
Now I see you in the flesh, and I think you look beautiful.
Bellissimo.
Bellissimo.
Io sono innamorato di te.
Bruno has just quite rightly pointed out that you were in love with Rosina at some point.
They pointed out that you were in love with Rosina at one point.
You often wonder why you follow stories. And actually, it's for moments like this to bring two remarkable people back together, having lost each other 75 years ago.
And this is just the start of the conversation.
Yeah.
You've got 74 years to catch up on. It's been a wonderful moment to witness.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, all of you.
Grazie, thank you.
She was absolutely marvellous. And I'm glad that she's still alive and enjoying life. She's alive, I'm alive, and we've got our own memories to carry us along, so I'm very glad that this has happened.
It's estimated that some 10,000 POWs in German-occupied Italy were fed, hidden, and guided by the Italian people. Ordinary people who had nothing put themselves on the line with the most incredible acts of humanity. To give a complete stranger from another land a chance of a life of freedom.